It's Tuesday, and that means it's time for terror. Once again, I had another great time. As Bertha pulled her panties up, I lit a cigarette and flipped her $20 for a job well done. Every time I pull into this shithole truck stop, she's the lot lizard that takes care of my needs. So when you coming back through again, Hank? Bertha asked me. Don't know, sweetheart. I got a lot of trucking to do and a lot of loads to haul back to California. Why? You missed me already? I replied. Well, you're always just so good to me and don't rough me up like some of the others is all, she exclaimed. I laughed deep and loud from my gut. Now don't you go thinking old Hank here's a softy, I said. Bertha smiled and pecked me on the cheek, then crawled out of my rig back into the Mojave night like the lizard that she was, quick to run over to the next rig and wait in customer. I grinned widely and zipped up my fly. The life of a long-haul trucker in the desert might not be for some people, be a glamorous life, but it was all I'd ever known. For over 18 years now, I've been a long-haul trucker on these dusty, lonely roads. It's a quiet life, just me and my rig and the radio for company, but this is how I liked it. I looked at my watch. It was getting late and time for me to be getting my mosey on. Places to be, loads to drop off, and all that. I fired up the engine and turned back onto the highway, leaving Bertha and the truck stop behind in the distance. I cranked up the radio and was greeted by the soft, sweet sounds of old Merle Haggard singing about whiskey and women. It suited me just fine. As the miles in the cactus flew by, I got to thinking about life. Funny thing, that thing we call life has a way of creeping up on you, just like the midnight does in the Mojave Desert. I took a swig from my flask and coughed at the burning taste of bourbon as it burned down my throat. That's the good stuff. Now don't get me wrong, I don't condone drinking and driving, but once in a while, a little nip off the bottle does a man good. It had been hours now into the void of pitch blackness that I had driven, hours upon hours of just me and the old highway and desert. Then I felt it, the twitch of my bladder. Looks like it was time to find me a rest stop and drain the main vein. I saw a sign on the right that said rest stop 10 clicks ahead and knew a small prayer had been answered. As I pulled my rig into this desolate rest stop, I noticed a concrete bunker, which I assumed was the pisser, some scruffy shrubs, and one car parked in the lot with its lights off. I parked and hopped down from my truck and made my way towards the restrooms. One lonely light post flickered on and off in the darkness. From behind the rest stop, I could hear something scurrying back and forth, probably a coyote. This is the desert after all. I opened the door and walked in. The lights overhead buzzed with a warble to them. From what I could see, I had the place all to myself. 2 pissers in one stall with the door closed. I saddled up to the urinal and did my business. As I stood there, I thought I heard a soft moaning noise come from the bathroom stall. I paid it no mind. Obviously the owner of that car out front was taking a shit. But the moaning grew louder, and what sounded like wet coughing began. Nervously, I finished my piss and zipped up, moving towards the sink to wash my hands when I heard it. A voice. A man's voice coming from the stall. Barely a whisper. Help me. The voice echoed off the walls. What the fuck, I thought. Please help me. The voice repeated. Something ain't right, and my gut started to twirl. Cautiously, I looked towards the stall door. Was that blood on the door? A long crimson streak of it dripped down to the tiles of the floor? This situation had my skin crawling off my flesh, but Mama didn't raise no sissy, so I crept towards the door. Hey, is somebody in there? I called out. Nothing but silence. The lights above flickered. I said, someone in there. The voice, now more of a gurgle, rang out, help me. I knuckled up to the door and opened it slowly. I wish I hadn't. Sitting slumped back on the shitter was the most gruesome sight I had ever seen. A man, or what was left of him, looked at me in a state of agony. His skin had been completely removed, nothing but sinew and flesh bleeding out. The horror was too much to take in. I took a step back. What kind of psycho was out here skinning people alive in the desert? I turned to run for the exit. I knew that sounds cowardly, but shit, I'm not a cop or a soldier, just a trucker. And hell, from what I saw, there wasn't much to be done for that fella now. Yes, sir, self-preservation was the order of the night. I slammed through the restroom door into the cold, dark night. As I did, I heard a screeching howl come from the car parked to my left and a thumping noise. I looked over to see something straight out of hell crawling up on the car roof. It looked like a mangled, 6-foot-tall coyote wearing a bloody mess of human skin draped over itself. The creature snarled at me. I ran as fast as Usain Bolt in my cowboy boots towards my rig. I could hear the demon climbing over the car towards me. Then it spoke.
"Where you going, friend? Why you look like you have such nice leathery skin?"
I nearly pissed myself a second time as I loaded up into my truck, throwing it into gear and peeling out of there like the devil himself had come to collect me. Thump! Thump! What the fuck was that? Sounded like something was trying to crawl up the passenger side of my rig. I floored it back onto the highway as fast as possible. Then the glass of my passenger window shattered and a long, gnarled hand tried to reach in. I slapped at it with my right hand, but the damn thing sliced me deep across the forearm, and I heard that evil voice again say,
"Such delicious skin should be mine,"
it proclaimed as I swerved my rig back and forth on the highway. The arm flailed and disappeared back to the window. My hands gripped the wheel, and I gunned it down the dark, desolate stretch of road like a bat out of hell until the sun came over the horizon. I didn't stop driving. I just kept on going till noon, till I saw civilization again. I don't know what that thing is I ran into the Mojave Desert, but I tell you this, I will never stop to hang a piss again, no matter what. I'll get myself a fucking piss jug before that happens. This is my story, and I swear every word of it is true. Stay away from rest stops, and if you ever see what looks like a 6-foot-tall coyote wearing human skin, best to pray to whatever God you believe in and run for your life. I was up at the crack of dawn to feed my pigs and chickens. If you haven't guessed by now, I'm a farmer. My name is Angus, and my family has been on this land for as long as I can recall, going back to my great-great-grandpappy's days. As I came up to the chicken coop to give them their feed, I noticed something strange to me. A balloon animal, dog, sat in the coop. Now where could that have come from, I thought to myself. I looked across our fields and into the dark woods. Couldn't see a damn thing stirring. Was this some kind of joke being played on me? Then I thought, maybe my young son Toby had put it there, but that didn't make no sense. I finished up my chores after a few hours and headed into the farmstead to fetch a glass of water. Toby was playing with his toy tractor in the living room. "Toby, you know anything about this?" I asked, and showed him the purple balloon dog. "No, Papa, ain't seen that before, but it sure looks neat," he replied. This troubled me deeply, but I had no time to dwell on such things as the fields needed tending to. Long into the afternoon I worked. The skies were overcast and a dark malevolent gray bordering on pitch black. Then I heard it, quiet, above barely a whisper, the sound of laughter, a sick, maniacal kind of laughter only a madman would make. It resonated across the farm, carried on the wind. I looked up towards the woods that bordered my property and saw what looked to be the shadow of a man moving between the trees. "Who goes there?" I yelled at them. Silence was the only response I got. The laughter died off as suddenly as it had started. So I put down my scythe, headed towards the woods to investigate. The trees cast long, ominous shadows all around me. I stepped into the thicket and couldn't see anyone. As I searched deeper into the undergrowth, I came across two more things that puzzled me. Another balloon animal. This one looked like a giraffe, but was covered in what appeared to be red paint, and scuffed up in the ground were shoe prints. Large, comically oversized shoe prints. "What the hell is going on here?" I said to the woods as I picked up the balloon giraffe. The smell of copper on it was fierce. By God, what I initially thought to be red paint was blood. I dropped it. As I did, I heard the sound of my pigs squealing something fierce from their pen beside the old barn. Quickly I exited the woods and made my way over to the pig pen, only to find 3 of my prized pigs gutted and gasping in the mud. Their entrails spilled out onto them in a horrible mess as they died. This was wrong. All wrong. Some sick fucker was on my farm and up to no good. Then I noticed my scythe I had left in the field was propped up in the pen, dripping blood. Why would someone do this? I'm a well-liked farmer in my small town. No enemies, no trouble with the law. With trepidation, I began back towards my house. I was about 10 yards from the porch when I heard the sick laughter echo out again, but this time coming from the direction of the barn. I hurried inside, told my wife something evil was afoot, and to take Toby and head to her sister's house. She didn't question me. I loaded up in our truck and drove off as quick as possible. Then I got on the phone and called up my old pal Jebediah. The phone rang and rang, 2, 3, 4 rings, until finally answered. Jeb, it's Angus. Got some trouble on the farm. Might need an extra shotgun and a pair of hands to help me out, I asked. Jeb whistled loudly and said he'd be right over. For a tense 20 minutes, I waited on the front porch, rifle in hand, waiting on my friend to arrive. The skies began to darken further still. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I saw Jeb's old yellow truck come rumbling down the old dirt road. He pulled up to the beginning of my driveway and exited his truck. That's when the most bizarre and frightening thing I've ever seen happened. From the woods, moving faster than cheetahs, men came running out. A blur of activity. Their faces were all bright white, their clothes brightly colored in stripes and circles. Wait, these were fucking clowns. They surrounded Jeb in his truck and began to laugh, wide evil grins at their ugly painted faces. From the backs, in unison, they pulled out axes. Jeb and I went to reach for a shotgun, but it was too late. Like a pack of hyenas, they were on top of him, chopping him down with their sharp axes, all the while hooting, hollering, and laughing maniacally. Blood and guts from Jeb sprayed into the air. His screams loud. I raised my rifle from the porch and took aim at one of these evil clowns. I squeezed the trigger, hoping my aim was true. The bullet impacted into the back of one of the clown's heads. It merely turned to look at me with red glowing eyes.
Good shot, Farmer Angus, but you're next,
it cackled at me. I ran into my house and locked the door and went for the phone. I dialed the sheriff as quickly as my shivering fingers could. Sheriff Rikers, speaking. What seems to be the problem? Clown, Sheriff! Killer clowns! They got Jeb, and they're gonna get me next! I screamed incoherently into the phone. What, Angus? Clowns? And they did what? Come on now. No need to be trying to prank me, replied Sheriff Rikers. This is no joke, Sheriff. They came out the woods and butchered old Jeb right in front of my very eyes. Hacked him to pieces. Killer clowns, you say? Well, holy shit. I thought we only heard about this kind of thing in the bigger cities, mused the sheriff. All right, Angus. I'm gonna send out Deputy Doyle to come check on you. Hang tight. I was about to tell the sheriff to bring the fucking SWAT team when the line went dead and all the lights in the house cut out. Shit. I looked out the front window towards Jeb's truck, but the clowns were gone. All that remained was a puddle of blood by his open truck door. They'd taken his body and must have disappeared back into the woods. Now darkness had fallen across my farmstead, and the dread was palatable. I lit a candle and sat by the locked door. Who in the hell were these men running around dressed up like circus clowns, and what did they want with me? Thank the Lord, the wife and Toby were safe at her sister's house. I waited for hours as night crept in, when finally I heard the deputy's cruiser arrive. He pulled up right beside Jeb's truck. Deputy Doyle got out, hand on his service revolver, surveying the carnage. I unlocked the door and hollered at him. Deputy Doyle, quick into the house, run! There's killer clowns in the woods! Doyle smirked at me and replied lazily. Yeah, Sheriff. Inform me the circus done paid you a visit, Angus, but I don't see nobody. I tell you what, I'm gonna have a look around the property and woods, make sure everything is A-OK, alright, partner? I shook nervously, shrugged my shoulders, and locked the door. What a fool Deputy Doyle was not to heed my warning. He sauntered off towards the barn, and that was the last I saw of him as the night shrouded him like a cloak. Hours passed, and my candle burned low. Then I smelt it, the smell of burning wood. I peered out the kitchen window only to see that my barn was ablaze in flames. I could hear the pigs and cows hollering as they burned alive, and then from the depths of the barn they began to stream out, clown after clown, all wearing bright clothing and having two wide, hideous grins and glowing red eyes. There must have been 20 or 30 of them, and they were heading towards my home. I pissed myself, grabbed my rifle, and headed into the living room. Then I heard a thud against the front door. With tears in my eyes, looked out the front window to see Deputy Doyle's severed head lying on my front porch. Oh God, they got him too. Lord help me, why was this happening? The clowns surrounded the house, laughing maniacally the whole time. At every door and window they stood, 3 deep, all grinning at me with their fake smiles and razor-sharp teeth. The inside of my house glowed red from their evil eyes shining in the night. I fell to the floor. I couldn't take the terror no more. I raised the rifle and put it in my mouth. Better to go out this way than butchered alive, I thought. I gagged on the barrel. The clowns began banging on the doors and windows, thumping in harmony. Then one of them spoke. His voice crackled with malice.
You're next, Angus. No escaping.
The sound of axe smashing at the front door rang out. I began to squeeze the trigger when I heard the worst noise yet. A truck pulled into the driveway. I lowered the rifle from my face and peered out the front window. And beyond the clowns was my wife and her son exiting the truck. All at once, the evil, demonic clowns turned to their hateful gazes upon them and raised their axes. My wife and Toby screamed in vain into the darkened night, but it was no use. I raised the rifle to my mouth for the final time. The circus truly had come to town. The tale I'm about to tell is all true, every single word. If I hadn't lived through it myself, I probably wouldn't believe it. But sometimes, truth is stranger than fiction. It all happened back in 2004. My family had recently moved into an older home built in the 60s. At first things were fine, but as the weeks went on, more and more weird things would happen and come to transpire, ultimately culminating in the greatest tragedy of my life. Like I said, we had moved into our new to us forever home in 2004. Me age 12, my little brother age 10. Shared a big room with a large wooden walk-in closet with those doors that slide open on rollers. Very retro. The second night in our room was when it truly began. I think it was around 1 a.m. when I woke out of my slumber hearing scratching sounds coming from the closet. At first I was still half asleep and unsure of myself, but the longer I listened, the more I was convinced something was in the closet. I looked towards my little brother's bed, only to see he remained fast asleep, unbothered by the strange sounds. Eventually it stopped and I fell back asleep. A week later, same time at night, I was awoken to the sound of the scratching noise again, this time louder, as if nails were scratching the closet door. I peered through the shadows of our room, but couldn't see anything in the murky darkness of night. Then slowly I heard one of the closet doors open. Again, I narrowed my eyes in a feeble attempt to see what was going on, but only shadows were to be seen. The scratching abruptly ceased, and then the door was slowly closed. All the while, my little brother remained asleep and oblivious of the strange occurrences. I tried talking to my parents about what I had witnessed, but it was to no avail. They merely said I was having a vivid dream and to pay it no mind, or there was an old house possibly just settling in the night. But I know what I saw and heard were too real to be ignored. Something strange was going on in this house, and especially in my bedroom. The following week is when I truly lost all control. Again, late at night, again the scratching noises followed by the closet door slowly creeping open. This time about halfway, and then from the closet I heard a low guttural voice speak.
Who would like to play a game with me?
I froze in terror at that, blinking my eyes rapidly and clutching at my covers. This time when I looked towards my brother's bed, his eyes were also wide open and filled with fright. We both looked towards the closet. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest from the fear. What was something actually in our closet and talking to us? This cannot be real. Perhaps my father was playing a sick prank. Slowly the closet door started to close again, and the voice trailed off.
Oh, the fun games we could play!
I lay there paralyzed with dread in my bed, all night long, not falling back to sleep until dawn broke. The next day I asked my brother if he had heard the voice in our room too, and he just nodded, still too afraid to acknowledge what had happened. I knew talking to my parents would be useless, so I left alone. But I did hatch a plan that to my 12-year-old brain thought would work. That night before bed I slept with my baseball bat, and my brother had an old tennis racket. If whoever was lurking in the closet came back again or tried to do anything, we would be ready to at least fight back. That night around 1 a.m. the familiar strangeness began, but this time after asking,
Who would like to play a game with me?
The creepy voice continued with,
It's called counting sheep forever.
I tried to rise up from my bed, but was again paralyzed with fear. The door to the closet opened fully this time. I looked over to see my brother as wide-eyed as myself. This hideous man, who must have stood at least 7 feet tall, emerged. His limbs were long and gangly, and his clawed hands dragged on the floor. His nose was long and crooked, and his teeth were yellowed and rotting looking. He looked at us and smiled malevolently. Again I tried to move, but nothing. His long, greasy black hair trailed down his back as he limped closer and closer to our beds. I closed my eyes, not wanting to witness this monster. Then I heard strange whispering in the room and looked over to see the man thing crouching over top of my brother, speaking some foreign tongue directly into his ear. I tried to scream, but only a whimper came out. The ugly man turned towards me with glowing red eyes and said, "Go to sleep." And that was the last thing I remembered before fainting out of pure terror. The next morning, I woke to find the closet door closed and my brother still fast asleep. At the time, I thought nothing of it and went downstairs to have breakfast. After about 2 hours and realizing my brother still hadn't come down, my parents sent me to go check on him. I walked into our room to find him blissfully still sleeping. I tried to rouse him, but to no effect. I shook his shoulders, nothing. I yelled loudly for him to wake up, nothing. Finally, I called for my parents and tried to wake him in vain. Eventually, my parents took my little brother to the hospital, where the doctors came to the conclusion that somehow he had fallen into a deep coma. Other than that, he was in perfect health. This all happened in 2004, and to this day my little brother still lays in a hospital bed in a permanent coma state. The creepy closet man or demon or whatever it was never returned to terrorize me ever again, and to this day I have no idea what it did to my brother to end up in a coma for the rest of his life. Counting sheep forever!
And now a tale I like to call The Nosy Neighbour.
It's every day, every friggin' day. I get up, I make my coffee, I go outside to have my morning smoke, and there she is waiting for me, like a cancer I can't cure. The old biddy from next door, leering at me. "Oh, is he going to work today?" She asks me for the 1,000th time, and I reply for the 1,000th time. "Yes, Tabitha, I am, but you already knew that already." She cackles maniacally and stomps back into her home. It wouldn't be so bad, but it's literally the same thing, day after day. And when I come home from work, the same stupid questions and comments. "Oh, you worked a bit late today. Usually you're home by 5. If only there was some way to be rid of her and her stupid questions forever. A man can dream, can't he? On a late November evening, I got off work and began my walk home in the brisk autumn air. A deep chill fluttered down my back as I crossed the street and waved at an acquaintance driving by. Not really paying attention, I wandered homeward, dreading the usual barrage of asinine questions from my nosy neighbor. I turned the corner and noticed something peculiar. A new shop I hadn't seen on this block before. A faded sign hung above the storefront that said Grisly Things. What a strange name for a store, I mused to myself. Just as I was about to pass the shop, something compelled me to stop and look into the store's large window. I couldn't make out much in the gloom of evening, but it looked to be filled with trinkets and stacks upon stacks of old books. What the hell? Why not, I thought, and opened the door and went inside. As I'd surmised, it was a dusty old shop filled to the brim with books, trinkets, and junk. I peered around, trying to get a better look at things in the low light of a single overhead bulb that swung lazily from the ceiling. Suddenly a bell dinged, and as if he had materialized from thin air, sat a creepy old man behind the counter. He had greasy, long gray hair and seemed to be missing most of his teeth, with a large bulbous nose with a wart on the end of it. This guy looked like he was straight out of a Tales from the Crypt comic book. He smiled widely at me and spoke in a hoarse tone.
"Evening, friend. Find anything particularly to your liking?"
I looked around the dark shop and shook my head. "No, not really. Not unless you got something that can get rid of pesky, intrusive neighbors," I joked more to myself than the creepy-looking shopkeeper. Thump! Again, as it was summoned upon request, a dusty old book was now sitting on top of the counter. The cover looked like it was a mildewed green and brown leather.
"Here at Grisly Things, we pride ourselves on always having what a customer needs most,"
he crowed at me. Hesitantly, I took a step closer to the counter. What good is some crusty old book gonna do me, I asked.
Oh, this is no ordinary book, friend, but an ancient tome written by the sorcerer Abdul Al-Arzad himself, the Necronomicon. It contains various formulas and incantations predating even Sumerian culture.
I skeptically raised an eyebrow. Cut to the chase, buddy. How is some old spell book going to solve my problems? The shopkeeper began to flip through the old pages until landing on one with a strange yet hypnotic-looking symbol and writings on it.
How to summon a Sluggerath?
He smiled as if that was all the explanation I needed to hear. A slug of what? I questioned him.
A Sluggerath is an entity from another dimension with an insatiable lust for human flesh. Once it's summoned and fed fresh prey, and the summoner recites the proper incantations, it vaporizes back to its home dimension. Think of it as a no muss, no fuss, permanent solution to pesky neighbors.
I whistled slowly. This was getting too creepy and weird, even for me. Man-eating monsters? Sheesh. Now I heard it all, and turned to leave the shop. The creep called after me.
Tell you what, friend, try the spell out for yourself. If you're not satisfied with the results, then no charge. The book is free.
A free book? And all seemed like a good deal at the time. I turned back towards the counter, but the shopkeeper was gone. I looked around wondering where he went, but to no avail. It was as if he simply vanished into thin air. Quickly, I scooped up the old leather-bound book and left the creepy shop behind in the darkness of night. Like clockwork, old Biddy was waiting for me outside her door as I walked up my steps.
Oh, worked a little late, did ya, eh?
She inquired for the 1,000th time. Yes, Tabitha, I did, I replied.
What's that you got there? Some kind of book?
She leaned in and asked me. Yeah, it's about how to get rid of nosy neighbors and never mind their own business, I replied with a hint of malice and a grin.
Oh, huh,
she replied and slammed her door. I chuckled to myself and unlocked my door, wondering what if this silly book was true and could get rid of old Biddy once and for all. The next morning I got up and headed out with my morning coffee to have my smoke, and of course, old Biddy was already waiting.
Oh, going to work, are ya?
Actually, you know what, Tabitha? I'm calling in sick today. Got something real important to finally take care of, I replied. It felt like something had snapped my psyche. The constant badgering by this old woman over the years had driven me over the edge.
Oh, what important thing?
She asked. I smiled wickedly at her. Why don't you come over around, say, 6 o'clock and see for yourself? For once, old Biddy looked perplexed and unsure of herself. She replied and slammed her door in my face. The day was a whirlwind of activity for me. Carefully, I went over the instructions in the book on how to summon the entity to visible form. Over and over again, I checked the formula and made sure I was pronouncing the words properly. As the book instructed, I drew the intricate symbol of the Sluggerath on the cement of my basement floor. Each line perfect, I thought. Finally, it was time to summon the creature that would solve all my problems once and for all. I recited the forbidden passages over and over again, inducing a near trance-like frenzy, and then it happened. It was as if something began to shimmer in the circle on the floor and slowly take visible shape. I kept saying the words and the creature materialized. Oh my lord, what a hideous thing it was. Amorphous with no solid shape, tentacles, eyeballs, and teeth. Some parts looked like scaly, while others looked like they were covered in feathers. Truly, this was a thing straight out of H.P. Lovecraft's wildest nightmares. It oozed liquid from beneath its hulking frame and writhed within the circle, one tentacle reaching out towards me with a hungry look in its eyes. But it was as if an invisible force field stopped it dead in its tracks. The thing let out a roar of frustration and presumably hunger at being denied. I laughed to myself. I had done it. I had well and truly summoned a Sluggerath here into my basement. Now all I needed to do was lure old Biddy down here. That evening, at around 6 o'clock, I stepped out my door to find old Biddy standing by hers. Why, a wonderful evening it is, Tabitha. Yes, why, almost enchanting it is. I beamed at her, barely containing my excitement.
You seem a little too happy tonight, you know that?
She groaned at me, but I didn't care. Remember, Tabitha, when I said this morning about something important? Well, would you like to see something truly amazing? I asked. At that, her brow furrowed, but I could see curiosity was getting the best of the old girl. She'd been dying to see the inside of my home for years. Would she give up the chance now that it was finally offered?
"Don't be a ding-dong. I've lived long enough to see it all," she said with a grimace.
"Oh, no, neighbor. I promise this is something that will shock and amaze even you," I replied. Old Biddy looked left, then right, then sighed, and agreed to come see what had me so excited. I led her into the house and towards the basement door. "This way, Biddy, this way," I instructed, opening the basement door and letting her take the lead down the rickety old steps.
"It's awfully dark in here, huh?"
she said grumpily. Step by step, we descended closer to the waiting hungry beast. The air felt electric to me. Finally, we entered the center of the basement, and I clicked on the hanging bulb above. Old Biddy's eyes widened with terror at the sight of the Sluggerath. Its malignant eyes stared into her soul, and it snapped its many gaping mouths filled with giant sharp teeth.
What?
Exclaimed the annoying old lady as I shoved her into the beast. Voraciously, it bit into her and wrapped its tentacles around her limbs as it began to feast upon her flesh. Ha 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 ha! I had done it! I had finally rid myself of this nosy neighbor. No more asking me if I'm going to work. No more saying, "Oh, you're home late, aren't ya?" Triumphantly, I picked up the book to recite the final passage as old Biddy screamed in horror and desperation at her fate. The monster chewed through her flesh with ease, tearing chunks off with its spiked tentacles. Lazily, I thumbed through the old book, looking for the passage to send the hideous creature back from whence it came, to a reality beyond ours. As I flipped to where the page should be, I was overtaken with shock. The page! The fucking page to send it back was missing! It looked as if it had been torn up from the book! As if sensing my dismay, all the hideous eyes of the creature turned towards me at once with vicious glee. Where was the page? Oh God, no! That good-for-nothing shopkeeper had double-crossed me. One of the beast's tentacles stretched out towards me, breaking the barrier of the circle. I turned on my heel and ran towards the stairway as fast as I could as the beast slithered and wreathed and writhed after me. We were on day 5 of our trek deep into the heart of the Peruvian jungle in search of the lost temple of Supai. Above us, the canopy of trees provided little shade as we crossed small rivers and streams in the murky daylight. Our expedition to the unknown recesses of a place time had forgotten was led by Dr. Madsen, a world-renowned archaeologist from Miskatonic University. I, Dr. Jeffrey Bourne, took second in command, and with us came our 3 guides, Pedro, Miguel, and Jutjut, all of Peruvian heritage. We were in search of the lost golden mask of Supai, the ancient god of death. After years of research in the archives of Miskatonic University, Dr. Madsen had come to the conclusion that there must still be a small, hidden ancient temple dedicated to Supai, located deep within the Peruvian Amazon. So far, we had found no trace of this temple, and I was beginning to feel as if this dangerous expedition to the unknown was for naught. My collar itched, and I swatted away another mosquito for the 1,000th time. Thank science, we had all received our malaria shots before embarking on this seemingly doomed crusade. As we crossed the threshold into darker jungle, suddenly Jutjut stopped us in our tracks. "Dr. Madsen, Dr. Bourne, come look," he said, pointing at the ground. There in the dirt was the unmistakable prints of what appeared to be a large jaguar. Jutjut mentioned with his hands the large size of the tracks. "We go no further today. If jaguar is hunting, it will smell us," Jutjut warned. "Blast it, Jutjut. We have pistols and rifles, and the sun is still overhead. We have much ground still to cover until we reach the temple," replied Dr. Madsen. Jutjut grunted his dissent, but it was to no avail. Dr. Madsen was hell-bent on recovering the gold mask of Supai in as timely manner as possible, and Madsen, being the one to fund this expedition, had final say. Deeper into the jungle, full of whistling toucans and constantly chattering howler monkeys, we proceeded. Further and further into the Amazon jungle, we struggled with our backpacks, weighing us down, but our supplies were crucial to our survival. Pedro Miguel took the lead as Jutjut brought up the rear. Hours passed in the damp confines of this twisted maze of kapok trees, strangler figs, and rubber trees. The heat of the jungle was oppressive. Finally, with dusk approaching, Dr. Madsen called for us to stop and set up camp for the evening. As he went over his journals and notes and maps, the rest of us set about starting a fire and preparing our MREs, or meal ready to eat kits. Tonight I was having mashed potatoes and powdered steak that looked like mud and tasted like runny eggs, but it was better than starving to death, I suppose. From the depths of the jungle we heard the roar of a jaguar, low and guttural. "You see, Jut, nothing to fear. That jaguar of ours found itself an easier meal than the 5 of us," chided Dr. Madsen, spitting on the ground in Jut-Jut's direction. Jut-Jut merely scowled and went off to collect more firewood. Pedro and Miguel each lit a rolled cigarette. "If your pay wasn't so good, I'd leave first chance I got. Seeking the temple of the death god is madness," said Miguel to Madsen. "When I discover the lost temple of Supai and recover the gold mask, you'll be jumping out of your boots with joy, my dear Miguel," replied the doctor. Night came quickly for us in the jungle, an all-encompassing darkness that shrouded the land in terror of what could be lurking just outside the pathetic light of the fire. As I drank from my canteen a deep swig of water, I heard a strange noise off in the Peruvian wilderness. A low croaking sound, rhythmic and deep, it came, followed by a large stomping noises. "Chut-chut, what do you make of that?" I asked the lanky, darkly tanned guide. "To be honest, Dr. Bourne, I have no idea. The sounds of the jungle play with your mind at night time," he replied. "Enough chatter, men. I need sleep," commanded Dr. Madsen. One by one, we all nestled into our hammocks, wary of what insects may sting us in the night. As was our custom, one man would stay up on watch and stoke the fire until the next man's turn. Again I heard the strange thumping noise grow closer, followed by the guttural croaking sound. As dawn broke, I was awakened to the camp in disarray and panic. Jut-Jut was apparently missing. "Damn that man! Can't find good help these days. Must have abandoned us in the middle of the night, afraid of the glorious discovery we are sure to make any day now. Well, good riddance to the coward. He was only slowing us down," yelled Dr. Madsen, at no one in particular. Pedro whistled low and spoke up. "Jut-Jut would not leave us like that. He is one of the best lead jungle guides I know. Why, I once saw him swim through piranha-infested waters just to save a woman's toddler from certain death." Dr. Madsen glowered at the assistant guide. "Huh! Well, it looks like you've been promoted to lead guide, Pedro," replied Madsen. "Break up camp. We head out immediately. No time to waste looking for that traitor now." And so we did as commanded by the overbearing doctor and continued our quest deeper into the Peruvian jungle, full of terror. As we trekked single file down a small trail, I overheard Miguel and Pedro talking quietly to one another. "Did you notice those strange tracks near our camp last night, Miguel?" asked Pedro. "See, 4 large elongated toes with what looked like suction cups on the ends," replied Miguel. "Strange. I myself had not noticed these tracks, but Madsen gave us little time this morning to investigate Jut-Jut's disappearance. I hope nothing bad had happened to the trusted guide, and that indeed it was only nerves that got the best of him, forcing him to turn back." I gripped my pack strap and touched my holster, reassuring myself that my pistol was handy in case danger came for us. Late into the afternoon, we ventured onwards, using our machetes to hack through the undergrowth of this damp and humid place, when suddenly Madsen pushed us all to the side with excitement and glee. Hacking the vines, he uncovered a statue on our path. Do you see, men? Why, this shows the way to the temple. Look at the intricate carvings. Why, based on my extensive knowledge, this seems to indicate that the temple is just beyond that small hillock over there," he said, pointing to the east. I ushered up to the statue and explored its strange carvings. It showed a temple, and the top was indeed what appeared to be a grisly mask above it. Beneath the temple, large round creatures sat. Madsen began to hack further into the vines and brush with a renewed frenzy of excitement at this discovery, wanting to reach the temple by nightfall. Wearily, myself and the 2 guides followed behind him. The sun had now begun to set over the horizon when we came across the dilapidated ruins of the temple. Pedro spoke up. "Dr. Madsen, we have found the temple of Supai, the death god, but I caution that we should wait till morning to explore. We know not what we may find within." Madsen spun on his heel to look at the man. "Nonsense! I've trekked halfway across this godforsaken jungle to find the gold mask of Supai. I will not wait a minute longer," he screamed, and began to climb up the stone stairs toward the entrance. Myself, Miguel, and Pedro waited behind, beginning to set up camp at the foot of the temple. As we did, I heard the strange croaking noises emanate from nearby. This time they were louder and more pronounced. I shot a glance at the 2 guides, but both men seemed unfazed. Night descended, and as it did, still no sign of Dr. Madsen. The flames of the fire licked the cold night air as we sat around the fire awaiting Madsen's return. "He's been gone hours now. Perhaps he's injured himself," questioned Miguel. I looked upwards towards the ruins and replied, "If he has, then he shouldn't have been so reckless in his pursuit of lost treasures then." Both men nodded in agreement. Suddenly from the temple entrance emerged the doctor, screaming incoherently, waving a gold mask that was both brilliant yet hideous to behold. "I found it! But the Guardians found me! We need to get out of here now!" His voice was deadened by the canopy above. We all looked at him in shock and terror as a large, round shape pushed itself through the entranceway. It was hideous and bright orange with green stripes running down its sides. Its eyes were oversized and bulbous, its mouth a meter wide. It croaked hoarsely and lashed its tongue out towards the scrambling Madsen. By inches it missed its prey. The thing was a giant frog. Then from the underbrush of the jungle I heard more croaks and thumping, as if more of the brutes were jumping towards us. I raised my pistol and peered towards the dark jungle trees, seeing nothing. Miguel raised his rifle as Pedro unholstered his pistol. "It's the servants of Supai, the death god, come to devour us all for desecrating his temple," he yelled and fired blindly at the frog the size of a Volkswagen Bug as it lumbered down the temple steps. "This expedition is one of death and destruction. These behemoths must have been the ones that took Jut," said Miguel. Dr. Madsen tripped and fell at the very last step. The golden mask bounced and rolled, landing at my feet. Before anyone could do anything, the giant frog landed behind him, lashing out its hideous malformed tongue and wrapping around him like a python, sucking the greedy doctor into its wide gaping maw. Madsen screamed as the beast clamped its jaws down upon him, devouring him whole. I fired my pistol, but to no effect. Then from my left and right, two more giant lumbering frogs emerged from the jungle. Miguel screamed and went to run, but one of the creatures was upon him as if in a blood frenzy. Its mouth snapped down upon his torso. His legs were sheared off and fell to the ground in a bloody mess. Pedro began to fire shot after shot at the frog mere feet away from him, but to no effect. This one jumped up with surprising speed, clinging to a tree with his suction cup-like feet, then bounded straight down on top of the guide. He had no time to scream as he splattered underneath its massive weight. I looked to my left, then right, then straight ahead. I was surrounded by the dread monsters on all sides. Then something clicked in my head, and I remember one of the myths about the mask that Dr. Madsen would drone on about for hours. The mask! The golden mask of Supai! I reached to the ground and put it upon my head, covering my face. I turned towards the massive frogs and began to imitate a croaking noise as best I could. I waved my arms above my head to look bigger. Then I was, and continued the croaking sounds. At first they looked at me with blank, hideous eyes. Then slowly, one by one, they each returned back into the jungle. I had done it. I had convinced the guardian of Supai's temple that I was the death god, thus narrowly avoiding a horrible death at their frenzied maws. But, dear listener, my tale does not end here, but continues further, for even though I survived the attack by these man-eating giant frogs, I still had to navigate my way out of the Peruvian jungle with nearly no supplies left and no guide to lead the way. But that's a tale for another time.
We hope you enjoyed these deliciously scary tales. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Ta-ta for now.